There's a motorcycle sitting in garages and museums right now that people assume was the fastest thing on two wheels in 1969. It wasn't. People assume it invented the four-cylinder engine. It didn't. That layout was already decades old. They assume it was the first motorcycle ever built with a disc brake. Also no. Here's the part that should actually bother you. This bike didn't even get to market first. A British rival beat it to dealer floors by weeks. And yet this is still the machine historians point to as the birth of the modern superbike. 4 cylinders, 5 speeds, a hydraulic front disc, electric starting, all bolted onto one motorcycle, priced at $1,495 against a British rival landing at roughly $1,800. This is the story of the Honda CB750, and why being first was never the point. Let's get into it. Before 1969, if you wanted the fastest, most serious road motorcycle money could buy, you were looking at Britain. Full stop. Triumph, BSA, Norton. These were the names that defined what a big sporting motorcycle was supposed to be, and Britain had already proven decades earlier that extreme performance on two wheels was possible. The Vincent Black Shadow, built back in 1948, was a genuinely fast, genuinely advanced motorcycle at a time when Japan wasn't building anything close to a flagship. It just wasn't a bike most riders would ever own. Low volume, high exclusivity, the kind of machine you admired from across the showroom, not one you financed. And starting a big British twin wasn't exactly a formality either. No electric starter. You stood over it, put your full body weight into a kickstart lever, and hoped you'd time the compression right. Miss it, and you did it again. That was just part of owning one of these things. Big parallel twins also vibrated hard at real speed, enough that Norton built an entire engineering solution around it. The Commando used a rubber-mounted system called Isolastic to isolate the rider from the worst of the shaking. Notice what that system does, though. It doesn't fix the vibration. It just tries to keep it away from your hands. Honda, meanwhile, had already conquered the small and mid-size motorcycle world. Reliable, efficient, everywhere. But no flagship. Nothing that could stand next to British prestige or give American riders what they actually wanted from a big highway motorcycle: real displacement, real torque, real presence. Honda had built something advanced before, the CB450 with double overhead cams, and it still didn't become the flagship America was asking for. So heading into the late 1960s, the entire industry was sitting on one open question. Japan had mastered the small motorcycle. Could it actually win in the big league? Because up to this point, big league and Japanese motorcycle simply weren't phrases anyone put in the same sentence. Japan meant commuter bikes, reliable, cheap, forgettable, the kind of machine you rode to work, not the kind you bragged about at a bike night. That reputation was earned honestly. It was also about to become completely outdated. Here's where the story gets more complicated than most people realize, because Honda wasn't the only company that saw this question coming. By around 1965, British engineers Bert Hopwood and Doug Helle already had a running prototype sitting in front of them, a 3-cylinder, 750 cubic centimeters motorcycle, the machine that would eventually become the Triumph Trident and BSA Rocket 3. Britain wasn't standing still. Britain was already building the next chapter, and Honda knew it. In its own account of this period, Honda would later acknowledge something worth sitting with. Awareness of that British triple helped shape the direction of their own project. This wasn't a case of Honda inventing the future alone on a blank sheet of paper. This was Honda finding out a rival had already started moving and realizing they were behind. At the same time, pressure was building from the other direction. American Honda wanted a bigger motorcycle and wanted it badly. More displacement, more torque, more highway credibility, the kind of machine that could hold its own on an American interstate at 80 miles an hour for hours at a time. That demand was landing on the desk of Kihachiro Kawashima, president of American Honda, and it was real. Leading the response on Honda's side was engineer Yoshiro Harada. And here's what's easy to miss about his job. It wasn't to invent anything. 4 cylinders already existed. Overhead cams already existed. Disc brakes already existed. Electric starters already existed. Every ingredient Honda needed was already sitting somewhere in the industry, in pieces. Harada's job was harder than invention. His job was integration. take everything scattered across a dozen different motorcycles from a dozen different companies, and fuse it into one machine that was fast, refined, affordable, and could roll off a production line by the thousands. Nobody had done that yet. Not Britain, not anyone else. Individual manufacturers had individual pieces of the puzzle. A fast engine here, a good brake there, a smooth running twin somewhere else. Nobody had put the entire picture together in a single motorcycle that ordinary dealers could stock and ordinary riders could afford. That gap, sitting wide open in 1965, is exactly where this story is headed. Remember that, because it's the exact thing that decides how this story ends. Honda's engineers landed on a 736 cubic centimeter transverse inline 4, single overhead cam, 5-speed gearbox, electric starter, and a hydraulic front disc brake. On paper, it read like a wish list. On the workbench, it was a much harder problem than anything Honda had tackled before. Why does the layout matter? Because a transverse 4 has better inherent primary balance than a big parallel twin. Opposing pairs of pistons cancel out most of the shaking force at the source. Norton's Commando took a different approach entirely. Instead of fixing the imbalance, it isolated the engine, gearbox, and swing arm as a unit on rubber mounts, keeping the vibration out of the frame, the seat, and the rider's hands. Honda's fix was baked into the architecture. Norton's was bolted on afterward. And Honda wasn't building this from zero engineering knowledge. The company had walked away from Grand Prix racing in 1967, but it walked away with something valuable. Years of high-revving, multi-cylinder engine experience gained the hard way on the racetrack that suddenly had a road-going home. That racing background is part of why Honda could even attempt an engine this ambitious for a mainstream production motorcycle in the first place. Most manufacturers simply didn't have that kind of institutional knowledge sitting on the shelf. Sophisticated does not automatically mean durable, though, and this is where development actually got difficult. During endurance testing, Honda's early pistons started failing. Heat buildup, scuffing, real damage under sustained high-output running. The test sequence was brutal by design. Roughly 200 hours at 70% power, followed by 20 hours flat out at full throttle. That is not a quick lap around a test track. That is a deliberate attempt to replicate the worst possible way a customer might actually ride the thing, compressed into a punishing lab schedule. The pistons could not survive it. Honda had to scrap the design and start over. That single detail tells you everything about what this project actually was. Not a headline horsepower number chasing glory. An engineering team quietly solving the unglamorous problem of making extreme performance survive real abuse mile after mile in the hands of ordinary riders who had never heard the word isolastic and never would. Think about what that redesign actually cost Honda. Every day spent going back to the drawing board on pistons was a day the British Triple had to build a bigger lead. This was not happening in a vacuum where Honda could take as long as it wanted. The clock was already running, and even after the engineering problems were solved, a second problem was waiting, one that had nothing to do with engines at all. Early production efficiency was poor. By some accounts, Honda was turning out as few as 5 motorcycles a day. Sit with that number for a second. 5 motorcycles a day. What good is the most advanced production motorcycle in the world if you can only build 5 of them before the sun goes down? Honda had solved the machine. They had not yet solved the factory. And in an industry where the entire pitch was affordability and volume, that gap between engineering success and manufacturing reality could have quietly sunk the whole project before a single customer ever saw one. January 1969, Las Vegas. Honda puts 4 handmade CB750 prototypes in front of American dealers. No mass production yet, no guarantee anyone would buy in. Just 4 motorcycles and a number, $1,495. Now line up what was actually on the table. The Triumph Trident and BSA Rocket 3, a 740 cubic centimeters overhead valve triple, 4-speed gearbox, drum front brake, kickstart only, publicly unveiled in September of 1968, technically first to market, full stop, no argument. The Honda CB750, 736 cubic centimeters overhead, cam inline 4, 5-speed gearbox, not 4, a hydraulic front disc, not a drum, electric starting, not a kickstart lever, announced afterward at roughly $1,495 against the British bike's $1,800. Britain got there first. That's real, and it matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But arriving first and arriving complete are two different wins. Honda didn't show up with less. Honda showed up with more equipment, at a lower price, backed by a company that could actually manufacture it at scale. Yoshiro Harada later recalled the room breaking into loud, sustained applause the moment that $1,495 figure was read out. That's the turn. Not because Honda invented something nobody had ever seen, because Honda delivered the complete package first, for less money than the company that beat them to the showroom floor. If you're into deep dives on the machines that actually shifted an entire industry, the subscribe button is right there. I cover motorcycle history, engineering stories, and industry drama every week. Now, back to Vegas, because that applause turned into a logistics emergency almost overnight. Orders came in faster than Honda had planned for, so much faster that the company had to blow past its own production targets. The daily build rate jumped from roughly 25 motorcycles a day to more than 100. That's not a rounding error. That's a company caught flat-footed by its own success, scrambling to retool a production line that had, only months earlier, been struggling to hit 5 bikes a day into one that now had to hit triple-digit output just to keep dealers stocked. And the bike backed up every bit of that hype once independent testers got their hands on one. Cycle World clocked it at roughly 123 miles per hour and praised its braking, its flexibility, and its ability to hold that pace without falling apart. Reviewers weren't grading the piston redesign directly. They had no way to know about that internal battle. But a bike that sails through sustained high-speed testing without a mechanical complaint is exactly what months of unglamorous endurance work on the test bench are supposed to buy you. Then in 1970, Dick Mann took a race-prepared CB750-based machine to victory at the Daytona 200. Worth being precise, that wasn't a showroom bike straight off the line. It was purpose-built for racing. But it handed Honda a genuine American performance credential at the exact moment the brand needed one. Proof this wasn't just a fast motorcycle on paper, but a platform capable of winning against everything else on the American racing circuit. Put those three things together, the production scramble, the Cycle World numbers, the Daytona win, and you get a pattern. This wasn't a bike that impressed a room in Las Vegas and then quietly disappointed everyone once real customers got their hands on it. Every single data point after the launch confirmed what that room applauded in the first place. Britain, meanwhile, didn't just fold overnight. The triples evolved, 5 speeds eventually, disc brakes eventually, electric starting eventually. Give credit where it's due. British engineers kept improving the Trident and Rocket 3 well after Honda's launch. But by then, the ground underneath the British industry was already cracking. Underinvestment, management failures, and financial instability that had been building for years before Honda ever touched down in Las Vegas. Here's the honest version of that story, because it deserves the honest version. The CB750 didn't push Britain off a cliff on its own. It arrived right as the ground was already giving way, and it made the fall a lot harder to hide. This is where Honda's move stops being a sales story and becomes an industry story, because it didn't just win one product cycle, it reset the entire competitive standard. Worth saying plainly first, the CB750's own chassis never fully caught up to what its engine could do. Frame, suspension, tire, and brake technology needed the better part of the next decade, running into the early 1980s, to catch up to the performance ceiling the engine had already broken through. That evolution was gradual, and it took the whole industry, not one company, to finish it. But the engine layout Honda proved out? That part didn't fade. In 1972, Kawasaki answered with the 903 cubic centimeters DOHC Z1, developed under the internal project name New York Steak. Bigger, more powerful, claiming around 82 horsepower against the CB750's 67 to 68. Kawasaki had already been circling a large 4-cylinder project of its own. What changed was the target they now had to beat. Then in 1976, Suzuki's GS750 confirmed the pattern was permanent. The large 4-stroke Japanese inline-4 wasn't a one-off experiment anymore. It was an established class, with a roster of manufacturers building inside it, What had been a single Honda gamble in 1969 was within 7 years a crowded, competitive category with multiple serious manufacturers fighting for the same customer. That's the real measure of how completely the ground had shifted. Look at what came after. Honda's own CBF and CBR families, Kawasaki's Z, GPZ, and Ninja lines, Yamaha's FJ, FZ, and YZF4s. None of them are literally the same engine bolted into a newer frame, but every one of them is running on the formula Honda proved was commercially unavoidable in 1969. Performance that's refined, priced to sell, and built to scale. That's the DNA. Not the metal, the formula. So what actually happened here? The Honda CB750 didn't invent the fast motorcycle. The Vincent proved that idea existed 2 decades earlier. It didn't invent the 4-cylinder layout, the disc brake, or the electric starter. It wasn't even first to market. Britain's triple beat it to dealer floors, fair and square. What Honda did was harder to see, and a lot harder to copy. They took every piece the industry already had lying around in isolation, made it durable enough to survive real abuse, priced it below the company that got there first, and figured out how to build it by the hundreds instead of by the handful. Kawasaki looked at that new line in the sand and built something bigger. The rest of the industry spent the next decade trying to catch up to both of them. The modern Superbike wasn't born the day somebody built something fast. Fast already existed. It was born the day extreme performance became something a regular dealer could put on the showroom floor, and a regular rider could actually afford to ride home. That's the real story behind the bike everyone thinks they already know. That's the whole story. Told straight, no myths, no shortcuts, just what actually happened. The subscribe button is right there. I'll see you in the next one.